Thank you for setting me up to talk about this. I know that you and many other Black people know the answer, but it is something that I'm still processing and it hits me really hard in the gut. And so I want people to understand that I am answering the question, what do I know? I'm not speaking for anyone. Many commenters today have pointed out how many affluent Black towns have been created and destroyed throughout United States history. And most non-Black people know about the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, Lake Lanier, but it was many Black towns. One commenter said over 60. And it's not that some Black people sometimes were able to establish a successful community that accumulated wealth. It's that Black people were consistently able to go anywhere and together establish strong communities that accumulated wealth and had education systems and businesses and were thriving. And every time it happened, people destroyed them. And then as you progress through time, it becomes less acceptable to burn and flood and massacre entire towns. So again, you have the passing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the United States opens the door to Asian immigration in 1965. The United States has a long history of using immigrants to get in the way of Black people. And so I think that this system of using immigrant-owned businesses in Black communities is designed to siphon wealth away from Black communities. And another commenter asked me, why do I think that people are afraid of letting Black people build their communities and accumulate wealth and to thrive? And we see it so many times. It's because they fear revenge, because they know what they have done to Black people. But again, we have been told that if Black people wanted revenge, it would have happened already. That is not what they want. And I think that people think that the violence and exploitation and abuse of power that they have exacted upon Black people and all Black, brown, indigenous, and people of color is a universal human trait. And that if anybody has that wealth and power, then they would return that evil in kind. But it's not. It is specific to, and all Black people want is to be allowed to thrive and accumulate wealth and exist as other people have been allowed to do.
Hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you're doing fine wherever you're tuning in from. I am glad that you decided to watch this video and you clicked on this video. Thank you so much. Now, in this video, I'll be talking about this Asian female creator who is really, she's a tough woman and she's a woman of substance who really knows what she's talking about. Now in today's video, I'll be reacting to some of her videos where she is talking about why whites fear Black excellence or why whites fear Black success. And it's really important that you get to watch these videos because remember, she's not white and neither is she Black, so she's not speaking from a Black point of view or from a white person's perspective, but she's speaking from an Asian's perspective. This is a third party's point of view. And she's a woman who, on her social media account, she has given all her efforts towards sensitizing or towards educating her people or her community about just creating awareness about the Blacks and the Black community and how the white supremacists are using the divide and conquer method just to spread division among the minority groups. And yeah, watching this video, you'll realize the kind of lies that have been planted or in the minds of our Asian brothers and sisters. They are taught that the Black person is lazy, that the Black person is less intelligent, that the Black person is bad, the Black person is a criminal. So in Asia, basically what she says is that they associate Blackness with bad things and with evil things. If you go in Asia and you tell a kid to maybe choose a black doll, between a black doll and palm colored doll, chances are, not even chances, it's definite that that kid will throw away that black doll. And it's not like throwing it away just because he or she prefers white. It's throwing it away because he or she has been poisoned, or because he or she has been told that black people are bad, they are criminals, they are lazy, they are less intelligent. And this is against what the fact is. And that is something that she also says. She says that black people are feared by whites. Whites have this fear that is kind of inborn. It's not just today. Their ancestors, the white ancestors, feared our ancestors. They knew that our ancestors were so powerful, and they feared that if at all they would realize the kind of power that they inhibit within themselves, then they may take control and the whites may lose control. And therefore they decided to hide this fact, and they chose a very shitty method. They decided to spread propaganda and spread lies about the black people or the black community. And yeah, I'll not say much. Let us just get to watch the video, and thereafter I'll be back with my commentary. And I really hope that you'll watch the video to the very end, because I really want to know what you think about this particular topic. I believe this is a topic that needs to be talked about. I believe we need to have a conversation about this. Let's not just ignore or throw it under the carpet. Yeah, it's something that we need to talk about. And without wasting any time, let's get to watch the video, and I'll be giving my commentary after this video. Hope to see you then.
I find that a good way to help people who have a different lived experience than you exercise empathy for the struggles that you face that they may not be familiar with is to help them understand. And I was hoping that you could help me understand what anti-white racism looks like. Can you tell me about how you don't know where your ancestors came from because they were kidnapped and enslaved? Or how you don't know what languages they spoke, what spiritual practices they had, or what traditional knowledge that should have been your birthright was lost, not because they were allowed to and wanted to assimilate, but because their enslavers or residential schools forced them to assimilate? Can you tell me about how your ancestors had explosives tied to them while they were building the United States railroads, and then as a show of appreciation, they were excluded from society for nearly 60 years? And could you tell me about the hundreds of towns that were destroyed, like the Black towns and Chinatowns and Japan towns, all destroyed by the same demographic? Can you tell me about the children who were unalived because they whistled at a woman or because they floated in a lake a little too far past the segregation line? And can you tell me how it was for your parents and your grandparents to be United States citizens who were put in internment camps on United States soil? Can you tell me how it was for your family to live in the back of their store because people who look like you were not allowed to purchase or rent homes? And could you tell me how it was for your parents and for you to shed blood, to be treated as human, as equal, and to be allowed to simply share the same space as other people? Can you tell me about the conversations that you have to have with your children about police interactions? And could you tell me about how your mother and your sisters and your daughters are concerned about having children because of lack of equitable access to healthcare, because doctors were told that people who look like you can't feel pain? Can you tell me how it feels to know that your ancestors lived here for thousands of years, but when you try to come here, you and your children are put in cages? And can you tell me how it felt when a few years ago, the president entertained having people who look like you expelled from the country again? Can you tell me what anti-white racism looks like beyond having your feelings hurt, feeling uncomfortable, and having your sense of superiority challenged? And when you're done telling me what anti-white racism feels like for you, could you please tell me why you're not fighting to end racism for everybody? Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in black communities, even though black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. And as I've said before, as a result of this, black wealth is essentially paid out twice when it goes to Asian American businesses. Once when the individual pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian American business owner removes the profit from the community. Because usually people open businesses in their own communities, and this is mutually beneficial, where the business owner is making a livelihood off of providing goods and services to their community, and by being a member of the community, they're contributing and they're investing back into the community. This is an ideal situation, and that is not what happens with Asian American businesses operating in black communities. Obviously, the issue of Asian American owned businesses operating in black communities is a huge source of tension because it is part of the daily violence faced by black people in their own communities when they are disrespected as customers, to the literal physical violence, as was the case of the salon in Brooklyn, where a black woman was locked into the salon by workers while they beat her with broomsticks, to the damage done to the psyches of particularly black children when they are accused of shoplifting. And this isn't a topic that I'm going to be able to cover in one video, but it is a conversation that I do want to start. I think that if you ask some people what was the source of the tension, they'll say the LA riots and what happened in Koreatown, but you cannot mention the LA riots without recognizing the unaliving of Latasha Harlins the year before. A 15-year-old girl who was unalived by an Asian shop owner who thought that she was shoplifting orange juice, but the money to pay for the orange juice was in her hand when she was unalived. To overlook that is to value profit and property over black bodies, which is at the root of the United States systemically racist system and capitalism. But I think that we have to go all the way back to the Civil Rights Amendment of 1964 and then the opening of Asian immigration in 1965. So in 1964, white power structure almost faced accountability to black people. Black people should have started to be able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. But instead, in 1965, the United States opened the door to Asian immigration, and redlining meant that Asian Americans were receiving business loans, but only to open businesses in black communities, and black people were still not receiving loans to open businesses in their own communities. So where you have this weaponized positionality of Asian Americans being put in black people's way, of course you are going to have resentment not only over the supplanted opportunity to open businesses in their communities, but also over the fact that the black dollar is now being paid out twice. Once when the customer pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian business owner removes that wealth from the black community. And I frequently heard the tension being framed as mutual misunderstanding, where these Asian shop owners didn't know about the civil rights struggles of black people, and black people were not familiar with the culture of Asian business owners. But I don't think that it can be framed as mutual misunderstanding where there is an uneven power dynamic. You have one demographic that is the business owners, and you have the other demographic that is having to pay. So where there is uneven power, I don't think that it's accurate to frame it as mutual misunderstanding. So my ancestors were asked by white men to come to this country, which they had stolen and forced black people to build, because they were hoping that my ancestors would be the new cheap and disposable labor to undercut the recently freed black people that lazy white men didn't want to pay. And when my ancestors wouldn't do that, they were lynched and massacred, their towns were destroyed, they were blown up while building the railroads, and ultimately they were excluded from society and the country for nearly 60 years. Then when the United States asked us to come back in the 1960s because they wanted to put us in the way of black people again, and the United States needed to rehabilitate its reputation with Asian countries that were gaining in economic and political power, we had civil rights because of black people. You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed. And the cell phone in my hand came from China. So I don't know if you're referencing Steve Jobs or Martin Cooper or the Finnish inventor who created the first pocket-sized telecommunication device in 1917, and you probably don't know either because your education system has left you terribly ignorant and without the critical thinking skills necessary to effectively gather information. Because you believe that most great inventions can be attributed to one white person, as opposed to recognizing that the patent system is how white people colonize intellectual property. We would not have cell phones if it wasn't for the creation of the gamma electrical cell by black inventor Henry T. Sampson. And most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for the particular microphone that was created by black inventor James Edward West. The creation of the first digital network, 1G, was launched in Japan, and then black electrical engineer Jesse Russell pioneered the creation of 2G, which launched in Finland first. 3G launched in Japan, 4G launched in Norway, 5G launched in South Korea, and 30% of the world's cell phones are manufactured in China. Because we of the global majority recognize that collective humanity has the ingenuity and creativity of one another to thank, whereas a lot of European Americans are laboring under the delusion that the rest of us have white people to thank. And it's this narcissistic ignorance that causes people like you to do embarrassing things, like leaving comments about Europeans and cell phones on a video about systemic anti-black racism in the United States. And while that could be written off as a comedic and senile non sequitur, we recognize it as a desperate attempt to center yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. The irony being that white people like to say not all white people and they shouldn't be held accountable for the misdeeds of their ancestors, yet they want to be associated with the greatness of the things that they think they invented. Oh boy. So, John Michael Kohler was an American who invented the bathtub in 1883. But let's think about this critically. Do you really think that nobody took a bath until John Michael Kohler invented the bathtub in 1883? Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So what he was talking about is the fact that Africans introduced bathing and the concept of personal hygiene to Western Europe in order to build a healthier society during the 800-year occupation of Spain. In particular, a man by this name introduced the practices of bathing, shaving, and using toothpaste, as well as drastically improving the eating habits of Western Europeans. Additionally, the first recorded history of people taking baths was in India in 500 BC. A lot of us have gotten used to how little history some people like you know, particularly where it comes to anything not Eurocentric. However, I have a tip. Before you make a comment like this, do a quick Google search for whatever you think the topic at hand is. In this case, who invented bathing or who introduced bathing to Europe, and then decide whether you still want to make this comment. Hey buddy, your comment needs some help because when Dr. Earl Haas patented the tampon in 1931, he got the idea from his friend. She used a sponge because before this, women around the globe had been using tampons for thousands of years. There was a medical document that described the use of papyrus tampons that came from Egypt around the 15th century BCE. And I think what you meant to say was this modern nice world was made possible by labor and ideas stolen by white greedy bad men exploited for ruthless capitalism. Because you are yet another narcissist who's been indoctrinated by the education system to lack the critical thinking skills to understand that patenting does not equal invention. Patenting is the colonization of intellectual property, because invention usually requires the collective efforts of a diverse group of people over time. As I tell my students when they're having difficulty learning something, try to be patient and don't be too hard on yourself. The ability to apply logical reasoning to historical fact isn't going to make sense to somebody who watches a video correcting an erroneous comment about the 1800s who responds with stay in the 21st century. But it's okay, we all have our strong suits. Being an ignorant bigot isn't mine, and intelligence isn't yours. But I'm sure there are things that you're good at that you can focus on and celebrate. And if you'd like to get better at being intelligent, again, be patient, practice every opportunity that you have, and I'm sure that you can improve. I hope that helps. Important facets of my personality include kindness and empathy and the courage to speak up against wrongdoing, which is why I spend a lot of time advocating for dismantling white supremacy culture and explaining the history of current forms of systemic oppression. And my original intent was to encourage Asian Americans to engage in anti racist work and to unlearn anti black bias. But who knew? There are so many narcissistic white people who show up to center themselves in conversations that don't have to have anything to do with them unless they identify with racism, white supremacy culture, and upholding forms of systemic.
Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it. And welcome back to the video once again. I had introduced it, and right now I'm glad you're here for the commentary. And looking at what the Asian woman has said, I totally agree. She has spoken the truth, and it's quite unfortunate that Asians are taught that blacks never invented anything. They're taught that blacks are lazy. They're taught that blacks are always angry and blacks can't be in a position to lead. Well, that's totally untrue. There's a video that I did last week on this very channel. If you look at my catalog, you'll be able to see it. And it's a video of a scientist, actually an Oxford professor, trying to debunk the false myth that race has something to do with IQ. You know, in the past, during the colonial days, there was a study that was made, and it was a study that really misled so many people. The study said and concluded that race had something to do with IQ, and it concluded that blacks had the lowest IQ. And remember, they were comparing the IQs of the slaves back then who were not educated, who were being fed poorly, and who were being mistreated. They were comparing their IQs with the IQs of their masters. You know, that was so unfair. Using the science that you know today, you know that your skin color has nothing, totally nothing to do with your IQ. But it's so unfortunate, and I kind of find it hilarious that our brothers and sisters from Asia still believe that blacks have a lower IQ, and it's not their fault. It's truly not, totally not their fault. That is the kind of lies that they have been fed, and they have been fed that kind of lie by a white person or a white supremacist who simply fears the situation whereby he or she might just lose power or control over the world to a black person. That is something that they have feared for a very long time. They have not told other communities or the Asians that black people took part or played a very huge role in building the United States of America. Were it not for black folks, then most of the developments in America that would not take place, be it just a simple labor or just manual labor. Blacks took part in it. Even if they were just spreading lies, then why not just mention that blacks are strong and the slaves took part in developing America, or they took part in building America? They did not mention that. They did not mention the role that blacks played in the development of some genres of music. I'm talking about jazz, I'm talking about blues, talk about hip hop. And these are genres of music that have really played a very huge role in humanity. You know, music plays a very huge role in humanity. Those are the kind of things that white supremacists will never mention. They will never mention. And for that, I'll really commend this woman for trying to create awareness on these kind of topics that people consider taboo, and not so many creators talk about these kind of topics. So I think by doing this, the white supremacists are just trying to divide and conquer. They fear that when these minority groups come together, they may displace them and they may take their position. They fear losing power. They fear losing control. They really fear no longer being at the top of the system or no longer controlling the system that they built themselves to benefit themselves. They fear what will happen when blacks realize their power or when Asians realize their power. And I am really happy that Asians are finally realizing their power, and they are kind of ahead of us Africans or African Americans. And they are currently doing quite well. I'm talking about the likes of China or the likes of Singapore, who have really risen and built their economies, and they've erased those white supremacist views or narratives. They have nothing upon them. But for us blacks, we're still struggling, and that's why such kind of YouTube channels exist. I am here to tell you that you are not any lesser than those white supremacists. You are not any lesser than those white people, or than any other ethnic group. We are equal, or if anything, we're even better than them. So thou shalt not feel lesser or a lesser human being. Thou shalt not be demoralized. You, as a black person, you're fine the way you are. You should not bleach. Bleaching won't help boost your IQ. You should not relate blackness to evil the way they are pushing that narrative. So it's about unlearning the things that we have been taught. I have friends who, up to date, they believe that whites are better than, or they have a higher IQ, which I don't believe is the case. And it's not just about believing. Science proves that to be a lie. And basically, it's something that they began. It's a system that they created. It's a narrative that they created just to benefit them. Otherwise, they fear that blacks may be successful one day or blacks might be in control one day, and that's something that they really fear, and they won't want something like that to really happen. So now that you know that, I want to end my video here. Thank you for watching. I'm glad you stayed to this very end. If you like the video, then please give it a thumbs up. That way this video will be able to reach so many people or more people like you who need to get this message. Or if you also feel like this is the kind of content that speaks to you, or if you feel like this is the kind of content that you like, then please consider subscribing to this channel. If you like content concerning blacks, please subscribe to this channel, Black Folk, and I'll be really grateful. My previous channel was deleted, and I am trying to grow this one from scratch once again, and we are doing it the same way. Now, with that, I hope I'll be seeing you in the next video. Otherwise, bye.